So last week we were in plague 7 with the hail, and this week we're going just the next one, plague number 8, as God continues to call Pharaoh to let the people go, and he continues to say no and hardens his heart. Exodus 10, 1 through 11. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh. I've made him and his officials stubborn so that I can show them my signs, and so that you can tell your children and your grandchildren how I overpowered the Egyptians when the signs I did among them. You will know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "This is what the Lord, the Hebrews' God, says. How long will you refuse to respect me? Let my people go so they can worship me. Otherwise, if you refuse to let my people go, I'm going to bring locusts into your country tomorrow. They will cover the landscape so you won't be able to see the ground. They will eat every last bit of vegetation that was left after the hail. They will eat all your trees growing in the fields. The locust will fill your houses and all your officials' houses and all the Egyptians' houses. Your parents and even your grandparents have never seen anything like it during their entire lifetime in this fertile land." Then Moses turned and left Pharaoh. Pharaoh's officials said to him, "How long will this man trap us in a corner like this? Let the people go so that they can worship the Lord their God. Don't you get it? Egypt is being destroyed." So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. And he said, "Go, worship the Lord your God, but who exactly is going with you?" Moses said, "We'll go with our young and old and our sons and daughters and with our flocks and herds, because we all must obey the Lord. We all must observe the Lord's festival." Pharaoh said to them, "Yes, the Lord will be with you all right, especially if I let your children go with you. Obviously, you're plotting some evil scheme. No way. Only your men can go and worship the Lord, because that's what you asked for." Then Pharaoh had them chased out of his presence. Okay, so we're getting near one of the final plagues here, and we already see there's some connection back to the one we studied last week, back in chapter 9. But here, this time the locusts are going to come, and every last bit of vegetation that was left after the hail. So there was some mercy the last time. God warned them ahead of time. He said, "Get your flocks and your servants indoors so the hail doesn't kill everyone." The durum and the spelt wheat hadn't yet popped up, so there was still going to be food in Egypt. But this time, it's even more final. This next plague is going to wipe out everything, right? And so it's ramping up the intensity once again. Moses is coming, but they're stubborn. This is a longer conversation, but I just like to point it out here, where God says, "I've made him and his officials stubborn." Behind this, the Hebrew there, in other translations, this is the interesting question around the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. Sometimes in the last chapter, Pharaoh hardens his own heart. He makes himself stubborn. Here it seems God's saying, "I'm going to make him have a hard heart." And that kind of goes back and forth. It's just maybe a quick word on that. What does it mean for God to harden Pharaoh's heart? I don't think that means getting into the text itself and the context. This doesn't mean that Pharaoh has no choice. Pharaoh still has a choice. It's more, I've heard other scholars have said this too, that this kind of idea, this motif, is saying God is strengthening his resolve. He's making it more enticing. He's strengthening his resolve to do this thing against the Lord. It feels like it is an act of judgment. It's a way of God showing up and saying, "I'm going to make Pharaoh fully show his hand." Right? He's not going to be able to hide. He's not going to be able to be a little like waffle and flip-flop. He's going to fully show his hand of who he is and what he's planning to do. But even at the whole time, Pharaoh, even while God is making his heart hard, Pharaoh still has a chance. He could still go against all of that. So it's not this like Pharaoh is being possessed or something like that, but it's that he's being strengthened to show his hand in a way that is allowing God to fully enact his judgment and show his glory and all of that. So that's a longer conversation, just a quick word there. Fascinating here, I think for the first time. So now Moses is continuing to ramp up the call. The plagues are getting worse and worse. And last week we saw that some of Pharaoh's officials were starting to believe in the Lord. Here, now they're also becoming a mouthpiece for the Lord. They're now coming and saying, "Why are you doing this? Israel is destroying Egypt. Egypt is being destroyed. Rather, don't you get it?" They are trying to convince Pharaoh that he's doing this all wrong. So they're kind of backing up Moses and Aaron even more so. Here, there's several things we might say. One, you almost wonder Pharaoh's sarcastic reply, especially if I let your children go. Obviously, you're plotting some evil scheme. Does Pharaoh think that they're going to go do some warped child sacrifice in the desert, something like that? Also, just the assumption here, the assumption of the world at that time is that the men are the ones who matter. The men are the ones who get to go and worship. But when Moses responds with, well, everyone's going, our young and our old, our sons and our daughters. And Moses is laying out what God has decreed is this kind of universal, very, you could call it egalitarian, meaning all equal, right? Everyone is actually called to worship the Lord in Yahweh's religion, right? Everyone, the young, the old, the men, the women, the sons, the daughters, everyone is supposed to go to worship the Lord. The assumption from Pharaoh, we saw this way back in chapter 1 and 2 of Exodus. Pharaoh discounts the women again and again, and here his assumption is, well, only the men really need to go, right? And God comes back with, no, everyone needs to go. The faith that he is calling Israel to is one where everyone gets to stand in God's presence. Young and old alike, men and women alike. It's this incredible picture here of this egalitarian thing. And even though Pharaoh is trying to say, well, I'll let some of you go. And you almost might think Moses could say, okay, well, we'll take that. Let's compromise, something like that. But there's no compromising here. If everyone can't go, it's not even worth it. And so there's this great picture of this kind of egalitarian vision of who gets to actually, who's respected and gets to worship the Lord. Well, I'd love to hear your questions, your concerns, your frustrations. These plague narratives definitely bring up a lot of questions about God's character, his motives, what's going on here, what was illuminating for you, and then also focusing in on that great vision of this egalitarian mode of worship, where in God's economy, everyone, young and old, men and women, children, parents, they all have a seat at the table to worship the Lord. It's not just for the elite, not just for the men, it's for everybody. I love that. So just reflect, what is God's character here? What is he calling us into this week?